The anime begins with Ririkyo, a cold, sharp-tongued teenager moving into a luxury condo, Ayakashi Hall, where only a select few live, though that's what everyone thinks. She is accompanied by Rensho, whom she's known since childhood, but she insists on calling him a mere neighbor. Then she insists on going to her apartment alone, so he obliges her. Along the way, she bumps into Soshir, a guy who tells her he's been waiting to meet her for a long time and he'll be her secret service agent, but she says she didn't sign up for one. So he immediately gives her a katana to get rid of him, because he's nothing without her and wants to be her dog, which leaves Ririkyo dumbfounded. Later, Rensho laughs at her secret service agent, and she thinks it's her family's doing, which upsets her because she wanted to be alone. The next day, Ririkyo wakes up agitated, and when she's ready to go to breakfast, she sees Soshir waiting for her at the door like a faithful dog. Later, while she's waiting for her breakfast, a pink-haired girl approaches her and introduces herself. She is Karuta, and she's a secret service agent from the resident of Room 2. After breakfast, Soshir shows Ririkyo around the building, and they meet another secret service agent named Nobara. She's a candid girl who appreciated Ririkyo's petite body, which creeped her out because the woman cannot stop saying maniac. The next day, Ririkyo wakes up agitated once again. Every time she falls asleep worried, nightmares from her past haunt her. As she eats her breakfast, she can't help but remember how she was as a child because of her lineage. Her feelings are so raw that Soshir can feel them and cries for her. After that, they go out for a walk, and she says she secluded herself here to be alone and gain confidence in herself so that she can interact normally with people. Right now she only causes unhappiness to the people around her, but Soshir contradicts her and starts to name all her good qualities. Later, Ririkyo finishes swimming and reflects on Soshir. He seems like a good guy, although she doesn't want to trust him because it would be repeating the mistakes of the past. Suddenly, a guy appears and threatens her with a gun, and she scoffs because he is human, and obviously the building has no anti-human protection because his kind are no match for them. Then Ririkyo's eyes start to glow, but before she can act, Soshir appears and grabs the guy's bullet with his hand. And in an instant, the place is filled with cherry blossoms, and Soshir is now different. He has fox ears and 9 tails. This is his yukai form. And not only him changes form. It turns out that 2 thieves had entered Ayakashi Hall, and one of them met Nobara, who now wears a kimono and can control ice. She says they are atavists, humans with yukai blood. On the other hand, Karuta gets angry because that guy touched her, and she took the form of a giant skeleton surrounded by a purple aura, making the guy faint in fear. Meanwhile, at the pool, Soshir apologizes to Ririkyo for his slowness and kisses her feet in a sign of loyalty. He says he is not with her because of her lineage or origin. He has waited for her for a long time and begs her to let him stay by her side. So, Ririkyo says he can be wherever he wants. The next day, while Ririkyo is having breakfast, Rensho takes his yukai form, which consists of a black scroll, and Soshir says he had never seen him that way because he arrived one day before her. Then Ririkyo laughs, saying that it was a coincidence that they were paired, but he assures her that nothing is a coincidence. The next day, Ririkyo goes down to have breakfast on her own and talks to Rensho. He prefers to be in his scroll form because it's more flexible, but ends up getting dirty with the soup. On the way to their rooms, she says she will go shopping with Soshir, and he jokes that they two get along well and that makes him proud, and he advises her that if they fight, she should write him letters of apology like she used to do when she was a child. When they arrive at Ririkyo's door, Soshir gets sad because she ate without his help, which is ridiculous. Then Rensho tells them he is accompanying them to go shopping because he has to go on an errand. At the mall, Soshir doesn't stop praising and pampering Ririkyo, and she doesn't stop him because she can't stop thinking about his words from yesterday. Apparently, she has found someone who is loyal only to her. After shopping, including a cell phone, Rensho shows them that he bought a cake and asks them to stay a little longer in the mall before returning. But since Ririkyo doesn't want to, Soshir says that he doesn't either, which makes Rensho think that she has Soshir hypnotized or something like that. After that, they arrive at Ayakashi Hall, and Nobara tells them that Karuta hasn't come back and it's almost dark, which is very dangerous. So, Rensho, Ririkyo, and Soshir go out to look for her, and the first thing they do is save their numbers in the cell phone. And then Rensho flies to the sky to look for her from above. But suddenly, a dark dome appears and Ririkyo is caught. So Soshir turns into his yukai form and asks Rensho to check on her for him from above while he tries to cut his way through with his katana. Rensho flies to the roof of the dark dome and finds Ririkyo. She says that this is a Nurikabe, an ancient yukai form that traps travelers at night and releases them at dawn. Rensho thinks they should sleep and wait, but Ririkyo doesn't want her dog to worry, so she decides to change in her yukai form. Suddenly, gusts of wind come out of her body and curved horns appear from her head. Her clothes also change and a sword appears in her hand. And without realizing it, She and Soshir attack the Nuracabe at the same time, breaking it into pieces, and when he sees her, he can't contain himself and hugs her tightly. At that moment, Rensho receives a call from Nobara. She says that Karuta returned, so they return too. As soon as they enter Ayakashi Hall, they are greeted with confetti and welcome greetings. It turns out that it was all a ruse to prepare a welcome party for both of them. Ririkyo doesn't want to open her mouth because she knows she'll ruin it with her sharp tongue, but she stays anyway because the welcome party is also for Soshir. Later, alone, she reads the instruction manual for her new cell phone and manages to send a text to Soshir, welcoming him and asking him to take care of her, which makes him smile. The next day, Ririkyo is getting ready for her first day at school and can't stop thinking about her childhood. She once told her sister that she envied her normal life, and her father slapped her because Ririkyo didn't understand her sister's suffering. She would always live in Ririkyo's shadow. When she goes down to breakfast, Soshir thanks her for her text last night and praises her for being admitted to high school with top grades, and not only that, she was chosen to speak as a representative of the class. At school, the students whisper behind Ririkyo's back that her family must have pulled strings to make her the top of the class, and she lets her sharp tongue act, telling them that they are jealous. After that, she runs into Karuta, and although Ririkyo wants to act distant, the pink-haired girl is not intimidated and takes her hand. Later, Ririkyo is surprised to not see Soshir waiting for her outside the school, so she decides to walk alone to Ayakashi Hall, and when she arrives, she finds Nobara and Rensho spying on someone. To Ririkyo's surprise, it is Soshir and a girl. She looks sad and brings her lips closer to him, and he kisses her. After that, Soshir explains to them that he dated that girl, and even though they broke up a long time ago, she wanted a closing kiss, and that's why he kissed her. But that leaves a bitter taste in Ririkyo's mouth, who complains that he was affectionate with someone he has no feelings for, and that's being despicable. He agrees with her and says that he's been so happy these days that he forgot how evil he is and apologizes for not meeting her expectations and asks if she's going to cancel their contract, and she says yes. At night, Ririkyo reproaches herself for being so harsh on Soshir. Although being honest with herself, she saw herself reflected in the woman Soshir kissed. In the past, her family was also affectionate with her, even though the affection was false, and it saddens her to think that Soshir could be behaving like that with her. The next day, Nobara wakes Ririkyo up early to help her get ready for the reception party. She notices that the teenager has dark circles under her eyes and assumes that they are because of Soshir, and she hopes that they will mend soon. At the party, Soshir shows up to take care of Ririkyo until she finds a new secret service agent. On the other hand, Ririkyo keeps reproaching herself for her pretentious attitude when talking to anyone. She even managed to hurt Soshir for something that was none of her business. The other students see her having a breakdown and make fun of her loneliness, saying that people can't stand being around her. Suddenly, Soshir throws water in their faces and asks them to retract what they said and starts naming all of Ririkyo's good qualities. The boys are shocked by what happened and demand compensation, so Ririkyo says that Soshir is her secret service agent and she will take the blame. So she pours a glass of water on herself. After that, she is called to give the entrance speech and she walks onto the stage dripping wet. Soshir feels bad about what happened, but unlike him, Ririkyo is happy because it's the first time someone stood up for her, so she thanks him. After the speech, Soshir tells her that they will bring her dry clothes soon, and she takes advantage of the fact that they are alone to apologize and asks him to be her secret service agent again, and he takes off his glove to make the pinky promise, and this time she promises not to back out. That night, a resident returned to Ayakashi Hall. He is Bonri, and his secret service agent is Zhang. The next day, Soshir acts more helpful and affectionate than ever towards Ririkyo, which causes her heart to not stop beating like crazy, so she thinks she has arrhythmia. At night, she runs into Bonri at the pool. He is grumpy and says he is a delinquent, which makes her laugh mockingly. This angers him, and suddenly, he transforms into his yukai form, a tanuki, a small raccoon demon. It turns out that Bonri cannot control his yukai transformation very well, so sometimes he takes the form of a raccoon without meaning to. At that moment, Zhang appears and introduces himself. He has bunny ears and acts jovial. He claims to know everything about everyone. Ririkyo doesn't understand what he means, and Zhang says that if they win tomorrow, he will tell her something she wants to know, for example, the cause of her arrhythmia. The next day, Ririkyo and Soshir meet Zhang. He is very happy to see Soshir, and he explains to her that Zhang used to be friends with his former master, Kangaroo, so they are practically childhood friends. At that moment, Bonri enters angrily. He is angry at Soshir because he has not yet gotten revenge for the times Kajiro treated him as a pet when he took the form of a raccoon, and even though Soshir could not disobey his former master. Soshir just wants to spend a quiet Sunday with Ririkyo, but she insists that he humor Bonri, since his ego was hit by Soshir calling him cute so many times in the past. Plus, They are now a team. Then Zhang explains that it won't be a fight, but a race to see who can get the signatures of all the residents and workers of Ayakashi Hall the fastest. Nobara is fascinated by the idea and decides to help Ririkyo if she lets her touch her thighs, and Ririkyo blushes because she's doing it for Soshir. Rensho also signs Ririkyo's sheet while to Banri. He asks him to do charades to amuse him for a while, so he and Zhang stay in the hall for a long time. Meanwhile, Ririkyo and Soshir get the signatures of the chef, the 3 maids, and the concierge. All of them are very peculiar and part yukai. After that, they look for Karuta. She is the last one they need a signature from, but when they find her in the garden, they see that Banri approached her first. Suddenly, Zhang appears and asks them to be quiet, so they watch Banri get shy around Karuta. He brought her sweet buns from his trip, which she eagerly eats because she always seems to be hungry. Then Zhang explains that Banri went to the mountain to train to be able to protect the love of his life, Karuta, although she can protect herself. Ririkyo quickly realizes that Zhang orchestrated all of this so that Banri would have an excuse to talk to Karuta. Back at her apartment, Ririkyo can't stop thinking about Zhang since he promised to tell her the cause of her arrhythmia if they won. And they won. She is so distracted that Soshir notices it and gets a little jealous because he saw Zhang whispering things to Ririkyo. Later, Ririkyo reads about the arrhythmia and hopes that it's not something serious. The next day, Ririkyo keeps receiving texts from someone she doesn't know. Rensho thinks it's a stalker because the messages say he's nearby and wants to be with her. He suggests telling Soshir, but she doesn't want to worry him because the stalker is probably an annoying human. After all, stalkers are a common thing in her life. At the school gates, Soshir waits for Ririkyo and acts like the boyfriend every girl wants and even calls Rensho brother-in-law, so he understands why Ririkyo prefers not to tell him about the stalker. At home, Ririkyo feels she should thank Soshir for always lifting her spirits, so she decides to write him a letter. But the letter papers she has don't convince her since they are the ones she used to write to someone else, so she goes out to buy some new ones. On the way home, she gets texts from the stalker again. He warns her that it's not safe for them to be alone at night, and she realizes that he's an atavist. Suddenly, she hears something behind her, but fortunately, Soshir appears and scares away the drunk man who was chasing her. Soshir says that Rensho told him about the stalker and scolds her for not telling him herself since it makes him feel useless. If something bad happened to her, he wouldn't forgive himself. This makes her blush and her feelings for him overwhelm her, but when she wants to tell him something, someone attacks them. Out of nowhere, a guy with horns attacks them with his katana, and Soshir immediately turns into his yukai form and protects them with his katana. The horned guy says that he's the one who's been texting her, and since she wasn't afraid, he decided to show himself. Then he leaves his yukai form and becomes human again. He is Kajiro, Sushi's former master, and not only that, he's Ririkyo's fiancé. They return to Ayakashi Hall and Kajiro is greeted by a cheerful Zhang, and he chains Karuta by the neck because she is his secret service agent, although she doesn't mind because he always gives her a bag of chips. At that moment, Banri goes down to the hall and is horrified to see Kajiro and can't help but remember the past, like the time they made him face a cobra or when they took him to the vet to give him a new haircut. Kajiro is a very sociable guy, so he brought them all souvenirs, although Nobara rejects him because she hates everything that comes from a man. Ririkyo doesn't want to even look at his face, even though he happily announces that they are engaged, and Rensho remembers that Ririkyo used to write letters to her fiancé every day and was very fond on him. But she denies it because their engagement was forged as a legal agreement between the two families, and they haven't seen each other since they were children. Then Kajiro says he likes that she is a beast and categorizes her as a beast, which is perfect because he is a and as she looks at him in shock, suddenly, he looks at his watch and says that he's late for his flight. He just wanted to visit his fiancée and talk to Soshir, but he doesn't have time and leaves. At night, Ririkyo remembers that the only happy moments of her childhood were when she received a letter from Kajiro, and that makes her realize that if he was Sushi's master at that time, he always knew that she was engaged. 2 weeks later, Ririkyo notices that Karuta is always hungry and acting weird, even at school, causing the students to call her weirdo. So Banri tries to get the others to talk about him as a delinquent to take her out of the spotlight, but it doesn't work. One day, Karuta eats her lunch very early, so, at lunchtime she doesn't have lunch to eat and Ririkyo gives her a bun, which earns her a hug from the ever-quiet Karuta. Later, Zhang shows up at school and tells Ririkyo that Banri is in the infirmary because he got into a fight with some other students for calling Karuta weirdo. They stay with him until Karuta arrives, so they leave them alone. Outside, Zhang explains to Ririkyo that Banri and Karuta are more than friends but less than lovers. They have known each other since they were very young, and their lives will be intertwined forever due to the yukai spirit they inherited, and Zhang advises her not to resist what has to happen. At home, Karuta gives Ririkyo a bunch of candy in gratitude for the bread she gave her at school. The next day, they are paired up in cooking class, and surprisingly Karuta is very good. Cooking is almost instinctive for her, and her food is delicious. While they eat, Ririkyo asks her about the wounds on her arms, and she says that yesterday she saw a kitten stuck in a tree, which reminded her of Bonri. She tried to help it, but the kitten scratched her. Then Karuta asks her bluntly if she likes Bonri, which shocks Ririkyo, and she fervently denies it, and that makes her realize that she might like Soshir. Later, Ririkyo is packing up the lab without noticing that a storm is brewing, and when she is ready to go home, she sees the wet floor. Immediately, a yukai called Wet Woman appears. It has a snake body and a woman's head. Then Ririkyo takes her yukai form and is ready to get rid of it using her spear, but Bonri appears turned into a raccoon. He says that it is his duty to protect a lady, and multiplies himself to attack the Wet Woman as a distraction for Ririkyo to attack her with her spear, and the plan works. Unfortunately, the Wet Woman's tail is still able to attack them and throws them out the window. All of this is seen by Karuta, who rushes to save them with her yukai form, dropping all the fake raccoons, which surprises Bonri, and she says smiling that she will always know who he is. The next day, crazy rumors spread at school about Karuta turning into a skeleton, and that she wanted to eat Bonri and Ririkyo, but they are just rumors, since thanks to Soshir and Zhang's abilities, all the recordings of the school were deleted. Days later, Soshir accompanies Ririkyo to the door of her apartment like every night, but suddenly, he takes her hand and locks them both in the apartment, saying that there are very dangerous and malevolent yukais outside, and calls Nobara to ask her what happened. It turns out that one of the maids won a flower pot, and a yukai was sleeping in the roots, and when it woke up, it grew thousands of times its size and flooded the halls of yukai in Ayakashi Hall. Now everyone must stay locked up until dawn. On one hand, Soshir and Ririkyo are in her apartment, Bonri and Zhang are in the Raccoon Boy's apartment, Karuta is alone in her apartment. On the other hand, Nobara, Rensho, and a maid are trapped in the dining room. As long as no one opens the doors, they will be protected by the barrier. Bonri doesn't care about the safety of others and wants to go to Karuta, but Zhang lies to him that an hour here is equivalent to a day outside, so if he trains until dawn, he will become stronger to be able to protect Karuta. On the other hand, Karuta is very hungry and apparently has a lot of ingredients to cook without waiting. Meanwhile, the employees are bored having to spend so much time together, unlike Nobara, who is having a great time playing with the maid. The ones who are having a good time are also Soshir and Ririkyo. He has everything at hand to pamper her, although he regrets not being able to wash her back because that would be inappropriate. Later, she lies down on her bed while he stands guard. She tries to thank him, although that is difficult for her since he does not believe himself worthy of her gratitude and does not understand that she wants to repay his kindness and care towards her. Suddenly, the war moment is interrupted when the barriers of Ayakashi Hall begin to fail because of Bonri, who stumbled upon the door and cracked it, causing Karuta to feel the danger towards him and leave her room to go to his. Then everyone takes their yukai form and realizes that the perpetrators are weak and annoying yukais. They are Obaryons, small yukais that stick to the human body in an indecent way. Everyone gathers in the hallway, and the Obaryons stick to Ririkyo's body, and Soshir eliminates them, completely outraged by the audacity of those yukais. Fortunately, in minutes it dawns, and the remains of Obaryons disappear. Days later, Soshir accompanies Ririkyo to the school gates as usual and acts like a polite boyfriend, which makes her wonder why other Secret Service agents behave more intimately with their partners. Clearly, there are many things she doesn't know about him. He knew about her long before he met her in person because he was Kajiro's Secret Service agent, and she can't help but wonder if there's any connection between that and the fact that he always says she saved him. During the school day, she spends all her time with Karuta and Bonri, although she refuses to accept that they are friends, even though that is obvious to others. At the end of day, Soshir waits patiently for her and says that he missed her during these hours, and on the way home, he asks her about school and her new friends, which makes her realize that he knew about her worries about those issues. The next day, she waits for Bonri and Karuta on the roof to have lunch together. According to the pink-haired girl, eating together increases friendship, and Ririkyo realizes that she spends a lot of time alone with Soshir, but she never saw him eat, and maybe the best way to get to know him is to have coffee together, since she is an expert at doing it. At night, she practices how to perfect her already perfect coffee and thinks about how to invite him to drink it with her. The easiest solution would be to be direct, but she doesn't have the courage to do it, so she spends the whole night thinking of ways to invite him to a coffee. The next day, she has dark circles under her eyes from not having slept, and the worst thing is that she didn't come up with any good ideas to invite Soshir to a coffee. So during the day, she tries to do it, but fails miserably every time. At night, she decides to be brave and meets him under the cherry blossom tree at Ayakashi Hall, where he tells her that he saw her worried all day and that worried him in turn. She marvels at the fact that he notices a lot of things about her and that makes her feel bad for not reciprocating it to him. She says that the other Secret Service agents are more intimate with their partners, and he apologizes, saying that the only way he knows how to communicate his affection is to be servicial, and that makes her understand many things about him. Then she gathers her courage and tells him that tomorrow she wants to have coffee with him, and when they sit down, they will be equals, and that shocks him, so much that he feels a pang in his heart. According to him, she has left him breathless. And to her surprise, he tells her an intimate fact about him. He loves coffee. The next day, Karuta and Bonri go down to breakfast and see a sign on the door. It says that they should pick a fight between them. So Karuta tells him that he is an idiot if he does not accept to eat parfaits with her, and he accepts, immediately blushing for getting to insult her. Then Ririkyo goes down to breakfast and is very nervous because tonight she and Soshir will drink coffee together in her room. On the other hand, Soshir behaves more attentive than ever, so much that he wants to peel the grapes and feed Ririkyo himself. After that, the three students go to school and the employees find the sign that orders them to fight each other, although Nobara only uses it to poke the maids with her fingers. On the other hand, Rensho and Zhang find a sign that says they shouldn't speak, so they start talking in sign language, and they wonder who is the culprit behind those pranks. At school, after that, they return to Ayakashi Hall and Ririkyo thoroughly cleans her entire apartment, but there are still 4 hours left until they have coffee. At that moment, she receives a text from Karuta, inviting her to have a study session in the garden with Bonri and her, which made everyone curious. So all the Secret Service agents surround them, and Zhang tells them that the three students will have an exam next week. When Soshir sees that Ririkyo is having trouble with math, he patiently helps her and confesses that he studied a lot before meeting her in case this moment comes. Then Bonri says that he will beat her in the exam, but Zhang interrupts, saying that their rivalry can be decided right now. He will be the host of the competition, so Bonri and Karuta are paired as a team. The first game will be to guess what is in the box, but Soshir doesn't want Ririkyo to touch it because it could be a bug or something dangerous, so he puts his hand in and guesses that it is straw. Then Karuta guesses that her box has a lobster, and Rensho gets jelly. The next game is a quiz about teams. Zhang asks Karuta what Bonri likes most about school, and she answers perfectly, making him blush. Then Zhang asks him what would be the perfect date that Karuta would like, and he shyly says that he would take her to a place where she can eat whatever she wants, and of course, that is the correct answer. Then, Zhang asks Rensho what the word maniac means to Nobara. That is something that she says a lot, and he doesn't know the answer, so Nobara explains that it is a way to make girls cuter in her imagination. And since she doesn't care much about Rensho, she refuses to answer a question about him. Finally, Zhang asks Soshir what Ririkyo would choose, a dog or a cat, and he answers correctly. But not only that, he takes the microphone and starts listing all of her preferences, and this lasts for hours, so Zhang ends the competition and announces that there is no winner. Ririkyo is a little exasperated because Soshir behaved like a child, bragging about how much he knew about her, but at the same time, she is grateful because it prevented her from being embarrassed by not knowing what to answer about him. Fortunately, it is already time for coffee, but when they get to her door, there is a sign that says they cannot talk, and they have no choice but to go down to the dining room, where everyone is gathered. On the tables, there are more signs with quizzes that supposedly have prizes, and everyone thinks that the culprit is Zhang, but he says he is innocent. One of the quizzes asks what the antonym of an antonym is, and Ririkyo gets it right, and her prize is a trip to an island with Kajiro. Suddenly, the lights go out and Kajiro appears. He was the one who was putting up those signs all day. Everyone is shocked to see him, and the first thing he does is give them a bunch of souvenirs from his trip, and then he chains Karuta by the neck, and for 5 hours, everyone is forced to play his evil games that consisted of using candles, dynamite, and whips. Before leaving, Kajiro offers Ririkyo to spend the night with him, but she turns him down, so he says goodbye, saying that they have to talk tomorrow. Before retiring to her apartment, Ririkyo tells Soshir they will have their coffee tomorrow after school, and he agrees, although he looks worried. The next day, Ririkyo and Bonri go to school, and he is worried because he hasn't seen Karuta since yesterday and can't believe that Ririkyo used to write to Kajiro. She says that she has already left those memories in the past, but admits that the letters she received were the only thing that gave her joy because those letters were meant for her. Later, she and Bonri leave school and are intercepted by Kajiro. He says they are going to have lunch together, and Bonri can't even look at Karuta because she doesn't seem to mind her necklace since she is also hungry. On the way to the restaurant, Kajiro tells Ririkyo that he ordered Soshir not to pick her up from school because he had to talk to her, which bothers her a lot and he doesn't understand why. At lunch, Bonri and Ririkyo are extremely uncomfortable, and the same thing happens at the aquarium, the cafeteria, the cinema, the shopping center, and the light show. Hours later, Ririkyo finally arrives at her apartment and feels guilty for not keeping her promise to Soshir, so she apologizes via text. But the minutes pass and he doesn't answer her, something unusual on his part. Then, she decides to go apologize in person since he is clearly so angry that he doesn't want to answer her and takes the musky melon as an apology gift for him. When he opens the door, she notices that he is wearing casual clothes and his hair is wet from the recent shower. It turns out that he wasn't ignoring her after all, although he is angry, even if he wants to show it. He notices her school clothes and accuses her of having spent a good time with Kajiro and takes her hand to kiss her pinky, reminding her that they have a contract and he will always be her dog. She abruptly removes her hand and runs away to her apartment without realizing that she is crying, and concludes that the feelings she feels towards Soshir are changing. The next day, Soshir goes to talk to Kajiro and begs him on his knees not to tell Ririkyo the truth, but he refuses and mocks him. Then Soshir turns into his Yukai form and says that he will change his opinion with his katana, and Kajiro gladly accepts the challenge, turning into his Yukai form as well, and the battle begins. They seem to be on equal terms and end up reaching the hallway. Suddenly, Ririkyo appears and orders them to stop fighting and accuses Kajiro of starting the fight because Soshir would never act without a reason, and Kajiro mockingly says that she trusts Soshir too much when they are both equally dishonest, and invites her to ask him why they are fighting, since Soshir could not refuse a request from her. Then Soshir says that Kajiro is right and sadly tells Ririkyo that he has been deceiving her. Soshir remembers how all started. His clan possesses the nefarious nine-tailed fox, and instead of treating those who possess the Yukai as gods, they lock them away, subjugating their powers. And so it happened with Soshir. He was locked away as a sacred relic without having human contact for years, until his adolescence when he planned his freedom. The first one he seized was a maid, and then he rose to become the toy of the most powerful woman in the clan, which was easy because she had no children and her husband didn't pay attention to her. He was rewarded with a bit of freedom, luxuries, and refinement, but it was all part of his plan for freedom. A year later, he attended a party as his lady's companion, and there he discovered that the hosts of the party were much more powerful than his clan, with strong morals and kind hearts. So, he sneaked out and spoke to the head of the family, Ian. It was easy for him to gain her pity, and she offered him asylum in her mansion, so he would serve him. That boy turned out to be Kajiro, a mischievous teenager who the first thing he did when he met him was order him to kiss his feet. And Soshir was willing to do it, but Kajiro immediately backed off. Serving Kajiro was easy, and the pay was good. He just had to hold on a few more years, and he could finally be free. But one day, Kajiro ordered him to answer a letter to his fiancée Ririkyo, and Soshir did it as if he were a good fiancé. Soshir created a perfect Kajiro, nice and kind. But as time went by, the character that Soshir invented was changing, and he found himself answering Ririkyo as if he were her fiancé. They wrote to each other about many things, such as the weather, music, books, school worries, and even about how to choose a mattress or how to drink coffee. Later, he realized that he had lost himself in the role of fiancé, and the feelings he pretended to answer the letters were now real. One day, Kajiro informed Soshir that Ririkyo would come to visit him and forbade him to tell her about the letters. But when Soshir saw her, he was disappointed because she was a child and clearly, she used a ghostwriter all this time. The next day, Kajiro told Soshir that Ririkyo was stressed out about being away from home and tells him that she has always been like that, a girl that no one understands, but he assures him that she would never use a ghostwriter. As the years went by, Soshir and Ririkyo continued writing to each other, and she opened up more and more to him. Something bittersweet for Soshir because she opened up to the imaginary Kajiro, not to him. So one day, he threw caution to the winds and answered her sincerely as Soshir, telling her about himself, his life and childhood, leaving out some things, and when she answered him, he was shocked to read that for the first time she felt connected to him. For the first time she felt his sincerity. Sometime later, he was old enough to take care of himself and decided to go live in Ayakashi Hall, because he knew that he would see Ririkyo again. Back to the present, Kajiro takes advantage of Sushi's silence and says that he never wrote her letters, and Ririkyo says she always knew that. Only a fool would believe that her fiancé would write those beautiful letters. Then Kajiro takes his human form and puts her in the elevator to talk to her alone, leaving Soshir outside. He gives her a little note that only says, "I'm sorry." He apologizes for never writing her a letter and confesses that he envied how she and he wrote to each other. And before leaving, he confesses that Soshir was the author of all the letters. Ririkyo is stunned by the truth and presses the elevator buttons to go to the floor where Soshir is, and when the doors open, she smiling tells Soshir that now she understands why he always knew how to understand her, But in reality, Socher feels that she understands him and hugs her so tightly that they both fall. After that, they go to her apartment and Socher says he can give the letters back to her if she wants. But she said that they were written for him after all, so she lets him keep them. The next day, the chef's son, Kotaro, is downcast and asks Rensho about the yukais. If his father is reincarnated into another person, will he marry another woman and have other children? That's such a complicated question that Rensho doesn't know how to answer. Luckily, Zhang shows up and tells the boy that he should write a letter to his father and put it in a time capsule so that he can read it in his next reincarnation and remember him. That sounds like a great idea to him. So Zhang spreads it around. Karuta decides to participate because she wants to make sure that she and Bonri will like each other in their next reincarnations, which makes him blush, and he runs off to write his own letter. So, Rensho goes to Ririkyo's apartment and tells her about the letters, and she agrees to do it too. Later, she brings another musk melon to Socher and brings him some letter paper and an envelope for him to write to his next reincarnation. After that, she goes down to the garden where everyone gathered to bury the time capsule full of letters. Then Kotaro asks his father about his next reincarnation, and he reassures him saying that he is his father right now. When his yukai reincarnates into another person in the future, that person will not be his father, and that reassures him. When Ririkyo puts her letter in the time capsule, Rensho tells her that it has Sushi's name on it, and she realizes that she accidentally switched the envelopes, and now Socher has the letter she wrote to herself. She quickly calls Socher to ask him about the letter, and he says that he already read it. She is so embarrassed that the others console her, saying that he surely feels the same way about her, but he doesn't show it because they are 7 years apart. Then Ririkyo decides to go hide in a park because she doesn't want to face him yet. That letter is as if she had confessed her feelings for him. Later, she receives a call from Socher and she stammers that what she wrote in the letter is not entirely true. She wants a business relationship with him, nothing more, and he says that he already knew that. Someone like him would never be worthy of her. That leaves Ririkyo speechless because now she realizes that he hates himself. When he arrives at the park, she stands in front of him and with great courage, she confesses that she loves him and throws herself into his arms, and he confesses that he loves her too. Sometime later, they start dating, enjoying each other's company, and one day he confesses to her a longing that his heart has. He wants them to form a family in the future and have a child. She realizes that he wants to make up for what they did to him as a child, forging a new tradition where his descendants are not locked up, and she hopes that one day that will come true, but in the meantime, they will enjoy their life together. Special episode. Sometime later, Ririkyo still doesn't get used to Socher being around as a boyfriend, so he transforms into a little boy nine-tailed fox. He's so cute that she hugs him and pets him like he's a stuffed animal, but she soon remembers that he's her boyfriend and turns red again. Then Socher transforms into a girl to get her used to the contact between the two of them, but that doesn't stop her from turning even redder. Unfortunately for them, their training stops when Nobara and Rensho discover them. Later, Zhang gets bored and starts poking Rensho with his finger, and he starts imitating Nobara, saying maniac every time Zhang pokes him with his finger. On the other hand, Karuta stares at Bonri and starts poking him with her finger. She says that with each poke, he has to like her more than before, which makes him blush, and she shamelessly pokes him thousands of times, leaving him exhausted but happy. At that moment, Kajiro appears, and as always, he gives a delicious souvenir to Karuta, but she starts poking him in the chest, and he starts reciting all his catchphrases. After that, he goes to find Ririkyo to poke her and continue the game, but Socher defends her and doesn't let him even get close to her. Then Ririkyo pokes Socher, waiting to see what he will do, and he tells her that he will act when they are alone. Days later, Kotaro brings his little sister Hana to Ayakashi Hall. He has to take care of her for today. Everyone finds Hana so cute that they agree to play house with her, and she assigns them roles. Rensho and Karuta will be her grandparents, Kotaro her brother, Ririkyo her mother, and when everyone thinks that she will name Socher her father, she gives him the role of delivery man. The game starts and Ririkyo is nervous because she never played house, so she tries to play her role of mother to perfection. Although everything falls apart when Socher, the delivery man, starts flirting with her. At that moment, Nobara arrives and wants to play house too, so Hana reassigns the roles. Karuta will be the grandmother, Rensho and Nobara will be her parents, Ririkyo and Kotaro her brothers, and Socher the dog. Since Nobara and Rensho don't get along as parents, Ririkyo takes on her role as the older sister and promises her siblings that she will run away with them when she gets a job, which is overheard by Socher the dog, who begs Ririkyo to take him with them. Suddenly, Kajiro appears and takes on the role of Ririkyo's real father and invites her to live with him. But Nobara finds out about this and, being a good mother, challenges Kajiro to a duel, which he loses miserably.